From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I'm conducting an oral history on behalf of the American Folklife Center of two North Indian or Hindustani musicians, Sant Sarod Master Soumya Chakravarti and Tabla Master Debu Nayak. Previously, they played at the Library of Congress as part of the Homegrown Concert Series in May during Asian American Heritage Month under the auspices of the American Folklife Center, co-sponsored by the Library of Congress Asian American Association. And now we'll turn to the questions, and I'd like them to tell me a little bit about their early life and how they got to the point of becoming master musicians. And we'll start with you, Soumya.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you for the introduction. So I could talk a lot about how I got into music, but the simple answer that comes to my mind, and I think that echoes with a lot of people of my generation from South Asia, is they were kind of forced into getting into music, and I use the word forced into, because it seems like a coercion technique at that point in time. But then that coercion unbeknownstly became a matter of love and falling in love with the art form. Just like people are sent to schools, and parallelly I was brought into music. But for me, it's a little bit of coercion plus also enticement. So I come from a family where I didn't have a musical heritage with me, but my parents were both interested in music. They used to attend concerts, festivals, etc. And I have two siblings, both older than me, and also had other extended family members living with us. And everybody was doing some sort of music, playing some sort of instrument or the other. And mostly it was string instruments like violin, sitar, sarod, vocal, and they were missing a tabla player. So I was enticed by the concept of rhythm, having heard live concerts and as well as recordings. So I started jumping in and started keeping the beat. And how would I keep the beat? Because I didn't have tablas with me. So I had two metal containers of cereal boxes and baby food. So those were the Dayan Baya, and I used to sit and play tabla with them. So that was my initiation into music. Seeing my level of interest, my parents decided that maybe I should have a tabla. And so I started learning tabla at the age of 8, I think. And also had a brief stint learning Western violin at school because I thought it was cool to go to chapel. I actually studied in an Episcopal Methodist school in India, and we had chapel service every Monday, and there was music along with it. So I was very interested in the choral singing and the violin playing. So my exploration into Western music also started at the same time, and I learned tabla for about a year and a half, and can't say if I was very good at it, but the concept of rhythm came into my mind. And around 11, I actually switched over into the sarod. How that happened, I don't again know. That may have been an act of coercion. It's been it's been so many years, I can't quite remember vividly. But it took me a little bit of time switching from the tabla to a string instrument. But when it did happen over the course of maybe 3-4 years of just readapting to learning another instrument, and because of playing the sarod, and I'll say why in a little bit later during the interview, I had to give up on the tabla and the violin because I had to keep nails to go play the sarod. But so ultimately, the tabla and the violin both diminished, and sarod became my primary instrument. So that, in short, is my journey and how the journey began. Almost, I would say, 37 years ago, and it still continues.
That's great. And what is it about the sarod that really attracted you? I mean, what made you give up the other two and choose this?
Again, at that point, when you're a boy of 10 or 11 years old, you just do what your parents tell you.
Okay.
And one day it's like, hey, you learn sarod, and then the other day it is or maybe you start with the tabla and then you learn the sarod. But that being said, there were certain aspects of the instrument that attracted me. I think the sarod and the sitar are probably the most common string instruments in India, or at least in northern India. And I always felt that there was the gender gap between those two instruments. The sarod, with its very deep sound, kind of sounded like a male, very macho kind of an instrument, and with the ability to do a lot of fast runs and patterns like the tabla, was very masculine. On the other hand, I heard the sitar, beautiful as it is. I just felt more biased towards the sarod, and that may have propelled me in that direction. Plus some gentle cajoling from my parents.
Right, always helps. And you, Debu?
Where do I start? My mom says that I started playing when I was 2.5, 3 years old. So I did purposely ask her this question, that when did you notice me playing? She said that, when you're 2.5, you've been always hitting against one finger against the other. And then anything you get, you just start drumming on it. So those days, it used to be sort of like customary that when the summer vacation comes, I grew up in Calcutta. And my parents, my father was in the West Bengal Civil Service in Bengal. And so when the summertime comes, the holiday will start and we will go to my ancestral home, which is 76 to 80 kilometers from Calcutta. It's a place called Panchetgarh, and it's a small principality where my grandfather and his ancestry came from there, and it's nothing but music.
Really?
So my mom came from this family, and as she put it many times, that music to me is in my blood. So, but I don't know how this particular instrument got ingrained, or I got sort of like drawn towards it. Then there are so many other instruments which I was exposed to. My mother, she's a fantastic sitar player when she was young. And she played until she was in her late 60s. But coming back to when we used to visit the ancestral home, I used to see my grandfather practice. His brothers are practicing either sitar, vocal, surbahar, jaltarang, tablas, pakhawaj, and flute. So all these instruments were being, I was exposed to. And I have seen my grandfather was teaching three things. One, he used to first start the morning with the vocal. And then as he's playing vocal, he would play tabla. But I was always drawn towards tabla. So he saw this interest in me, and he said, and while he was playing and singing, other students gathered around him, and they were also singing. And some of them are either doing it on their leg, or they're doing it like this, or they're just doing this,
Right.
just to keep the beat. I don't know how, but I somehow got drawn into this. And sooner or later, I can't put my finger on it, but sooner or later a set of drums entered the picture. and I started playing. So nobody really taught me, okay, this is what you do to do this sound, or this is what you do to this sound, or this sound. It was just naturally came to me. So before you know it, I was already playing with them, and this continued for years. I don't know when it stopped, but eventually they saw the interest in me. Both my parents, more so from my mother's side, and then my father was very busy. So she, at some point when we moved to Calcutta from one summer vacation, she introduced me to a maestro who was teaching close to my home. His name is Radhakant Nandi, and he was coming close to my home to teach. And I got into that class, and we started learning, and there are a lot of neighborhood kids too learning tabla. But I somehow started excelling in tabla, and I would play with different instruments, probably because I was playing in my ancestral home and bringing that knowledge, playing with other instruments as well as vocal, as well as the intricacies that goes with it. I'll bring all of that, and then I'll put it in practice. So that's pretty much how it happened. Eventually, as I aged, slowly I was exposed to different conferences, concerts, and so on. So that also has a lot of influence on me.
Do you continue? How does it work in Indian music? Do you follow the school of your first tabla teacher, or how do you decide what style your tabla player is going to? I mean, when you talk about your musical pedigree, how do you talk about that?
Yeah, when you're learning it initially, you don't worry about it, any of that. You just blindly follow your teacher. Okay, whatever the teacher is singing or playing, we learn two things simultaneously: the vocal part and the rhythm part. So how does, in my case at least, how does with a song, or how does rhythm fit into a vocal piece, so to speak? We call it bandish. Yeah. In a bandish, how does the vocal part goes? What is the rhythmic pattern in it? What is they call it in the tabla term, it's called teka. How does the teka takes shape in a bandish? So that's how I learned. Now, coming back to the question of schooling, later on I came to know that there are 6 schools in tabla. But the school that I was learning with my grandfather was Punjab. Yeah. The school that I came to learn later on in Calcutta was Benares. So I did not notice the stylistic difference, except when certain syllables, much later I realized it, that there are some differences in finger techniques. And we initially, when we were learning in my ancestral home, following it blindly, when I came to Calcutta after the holidays, we will follow that blindly. Mm-hmm. So somehow a style of my own got created, and I just ran with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And how would you answer that question about, your musical lineage in terms of style?
Yeah.
And how you, get to this point.
So my training has differed slightly from Debu's, because I have pretty much learned from one person belonging to one school. We also have at least 3 different musical lineages for Sarod, or schools. But because my training, even to this date, that if I've picked up nuances, it has stayed within our school of, our school comes from a small village in northern India called Shahjahanpur, named after the Emperor Shah Jahan. And the Shahjahanpur technique is very different from some of the other techniques, one being Gwalior, again named after a place, which the famous maestro Ustad Amjad Ali Khan belongs to. And also Maihar, which was a much later school, but founded by the father of, again, the legendary Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, Ustad Alauddin Khan. So these schools have different playing techniques, and I've heard them, and like he said, as you grow up, when you are learning, you just follow what is taught to you. But as you grow up and as you listen to different forms of music and different playing techniques, you start to discern those differences, and either you can imbibe them or you can choose to retain your own specific flavor. I think with the advent of electronic music, what has happened is the knowledge sharing has become more profound. It used to be pretty much, based on the formal training that one has from a teacher. And say, if I learn a composition or a particular rag, I would have learned it from my guru or teacher. Mm-hmm. Now I can just go on to an electronic medium like YouTube and can hear some compositions. And if I like it, and I have the capability of picking it up, I do pick it up and I can play it. Personally, I still believe in somewhat keeping the formal school lines, just because these differences, the lines would get blurred, but those differences, I think, existed for a reason. And somewhere deep down, I believe in preserving that lineage and paying homage to the great maestros that founded those techniques and kept those. Now, as if I want to play something outside of my school, I can, but I should recognize and acknowledge it, that this comes from a different school rather than what I formally trained under. So that's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that kind of explains how we kind of respect each other's boundary in terms of the schools.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult to do that nowadays because there's such a the word for it in Hindi is khichdi.
Yeah, it
which
is
sort of a mashup that is always possible.
The way Zakir ji has described when I was learning from him,
From Zakir Hussain?
from Zakir Hussain, and this is again different style.
Yeah.
Punjab. I came back to Punjab much later again. In between, I went to Farrukhabad also, and still do. But Zakir ji explained this as cocktail.
Cocktail Gharana. Cocktail lineage. So now it would be nice to sort of segue into having each of you talk a little bit about your instruments and sort of situate them in, the history of this particular and how musical instrument and how it is changing, if it's changing or if you adapt it on an individual level, if it, how versatile these are to change and an adaptation.
So the history of the sarod probably goes back about 200 to 300 years. When you consider how old Indian music is, it doesn't seem that old. Probably just, somewhere in the middle of the British era in India that the sarod formally took its place. And there are many theories of how the instrument came to being. Some said it was adapted from other Indian instruments. Some say it had its roots in Persia and Afghanistan and even Middle East. And the fact is that I think everybody is true to a certain extent. There are certain aspects of the instrument that when you hear the instrument or you look at its shape, you find similarities with other string instruments like the tar, the rabab, the oud. And
could you be specific about that in terms
in terms of the fact that there's a hollow air chamber, that there's a ultimately at the end of the day, any kind of plucked instrument is a piece of string or some pieces of string that are wound between two knotted areas. So you've got a peg, you've got a eye here, but most of these instruments, the tar, the rabab, have a similar type of shape, a very rounded or somewhat elliptical in certain cases, a drum which has an air chamber that amplifies the music, and then a finger plate. And they tend to be fretless instruments. The instruments that were traditionally developed in India were fretted instruments. Most notably was the whole family of veenas. The veena is a instrument that's made from two large pieces of gourd, which grows abundantly in India, and that's attached to a bamboo or wooden fingerboard, and they have frets in between, and with the strings tightened on both sides by pegs. Now, because of those two large gourds, it's kind of held in an upright position and played. Now, there are obviously various variants of these, but the veena produces a very deep sound that is amplified by the gourds. When there were some Afghan musicians who were the rababis, the rabab players, they came to India. The rabab, if you look at a picture of it, and I wish I had a photo to show you, it is actually almost like a miniature version of a sarod. Looks very similar. The only difference is the drum is elliptical and doesn't have as many strings, as has a few strings, and the strings are made of either gut or silk. And because the air chamber is much shallow and also much smaller, the instruments have a very dull, kind of a bland sound. But I would also say it's a little bit more earthy in nature.
Wasn't it also an accompanying?
It is
a vocal accompaniment?
It is a vocal accompaniment, mainly as a folk instrument.
Right.
And because of there was not a lot of sustenance in the note, it had this kind of dull, twangy sound. It was used to as almost like to keep the beat, and in some cases acted like a percussion, although not a percussion instrument. So if you listen to a lot of Middle Eastern music, you'll hear the rabab being extensively played even today. So these were the rababis that were like, they were marching band instrumentalists that came to India, and they settled down somewhere in northern India. And they heard court musicians in northern India playing the veena and also vocal music. And they got this idea of experimenting with the instrument to make it sound more like a voice and to build more sustenance. So in order to do so, they started to experiment, make it a slightly bigger instrument with the expansion of the air chamber. So you can see this camel hump, as we call it, to expand this in a way that it hollows out and connects with the broader drum. Now what that does, it creates more resonance, and also the strings got replaced with the advent of metal strings, when the metal drawing techniques and metal strings being available for piano and for other instruments. Metal strings became popular somewhere, I think, I'm thinking 18th century, and even maybe later, 19th century. And they started to use them on the sarod as well as other instruments. Now, and the cover on the drum, it's a sheepskin cover.
Yeah.
Because the size of the air chamber being increased, and also another additional air chamber. This is also serves both as a rest as well as a kind of an additional air chamber. The sound or the sustenance of the string increased significantly, and that allowed a lot of melodic work to be performed, which you could not do if you played with an instrument that didn't have as much sustenance. So what started to happen, and then the addition of these little strings that go underneath the bridge, the main bridge, which are called the sympathetic strings, and they are for resonance. They're not actually plucked, but when you play a note, by being in the same frequency, it starts to vibrate, and by that vibration it accentuates the melody.
And were those adopted from sitar or veena?
They were used in the veena, the surbahar, and also some of the other types of rababs that existed. The precursor to the sarod was another instrument called the shur shringar, and if you look at it today, it still is played in some provinces in northern India, mainly in the Sikh religion. They use it. The sur rabab and the sur shringar are used for Sikh religious chanting, and they had sympathetic strings, and that's where the sarodiyas or the rababis originally, they started to get this idea. So after a few rounds of metamorphosis, they created an instrument which is very different, by the way, from the sarod that you see today. And the initial sarods had a very elliptical drum, and they were the depth of the air chamber was not as much. But over course of time, with more experimentation, there was more resonance added to it. And it to answer your question, yes, it continues to evolve. There have been many different variations added. Like this rounded drum finally came through the Maihar Gharana. Although I belong to the Shahjahanpur Gharana, I play this round drum instrument, which is an experimentation that Ustad Alauddin Khan did and made this drum more round, thereby having a more rounded and deep sound. And these days with the advent of electronic music, there's also experimentation going on with making electronic versions of the sarod, which again, I would call out like there's a difference between an acoustic guitar and a classical guitar. They sound very different instruments. They are both guitars, but they are very different instruments. And likewise, the electric sarod and the regular classical sarod are very different instruments. So that's a bit about about this instrument. Obviously, there's a lot of technical details I can go into, but I'll see if you have any other questions.
We'll move on to Debu for now, and then come back.
Okay, so regarding tabla, tabla is relatively in the annals of history with other Indian percussive instruments, a relatively young instrument. It happened, in other words, tabla came to India as part of probably the Muslim invasion that took place in many times in the Indian history. But it came around, and there are, again, different school of thoughts. It came around between 13th and 14th century. And during these invasions from Persia to India, a lot of learned men and philosophers and musicians, they also came. And they remained in India, never went back with them. One of these, I call it saints, or musicians, so to speak, was Amir Khusro.
And he was a poet also.
And he was a poet also. And he wrote many, he created many musical instruments as well. So, and there are, anyway, there are different school of thoughts about Amir Khusro being the creator of tabla or not. So Amir Khusro, one thing they do agree on, that here is a guy who came from Persia and studied Indian music. And how did he do that? By going to different places. And one of the areas that he went was he used to listen to the Hindu chants in the temples. And with the chants came a lot of the musical chants that he used to observe. And he used to observe not only the chants, the way the melodic structure was coming through, he also used to observe the musical instruments that are being played with these melodies and chants. One such instrument is called pakhawaj.
Yes, that's the apocryphal story of
Yes,
cutting it in half.
and pakhawaj is known as the mother of tabla.
Right.
Why? because Pakhawaj used to be part of a particular type of genre called Drupad Sangeet. And Drupad used to be called the original classical form of vocal music. And Pakhawaj used to be played, still does, and the people play Pakhawaj with it. But Amir Khusro looked at that instrument and he had a different idea. He thought that
Maybe you should describe what the Pakhawaj
Yeah,
looks
what it
like.
looks like.
the Pakhawaj is a cylindrical instrument. Okay, so if I put it bluntly, it'll look like this. So if you put it sidewise, it'll have a bigger head to play it like this in a sidewise way, and play it like this.
And it's played with a slap.
The slap, etc. But you know, I'll come to that when I explain to you the way the finger techniques evolved. So what happened was his idea was this instrument could be played better if we sit in an upright position. Now the geographical location of Amir Khusro at this point was Delhi. And because he came up with this instrument in Delhi, the Delhi Gharana started. So Delhi School of Tabla playing started, and the first guy in recorded history that we know of, his name is Siddhar Khan. And Siddhar Khan belonged to Delhi, and he was living close to where Amir Khusro's Dargah was, where he used to live. And Siddhar Khan picked it up and he started playing it. And sooner or later, a school was formed. Delhi Gharana started. And as he was, as the school was getting older and older, different students came to learn from him. And then they would learn from him and they would find their own way to tweak the instrument and so on. Speaking of the instrument itself, the first instrument in recorded history, as I know it, is made of wood, as Pakhawaj was. He just cuts it into half, put it in an upright position, and made it a bassy sort of sound on the left hand, and the right hand a sharper sound. The instrument is made out of raw hide from goat or sheep, from the same for here, and these straps are also from the same material. However, the chamber in the left-hand drum to create the bassy sound at that point was wood, and then later on, as it evolved, it became clay, because the clay pot was being played in the south. Somebody had this idea that if we change that to clay, the bassy sound would be even more bassier. So that was experimented with. It went on for a while. If you look at the pictures of old, like 18th century or 17th century tabla player, you will see they're either wood or clay. It is around 1900 something, 1902, 3, around that time, this experimentation reached in the brass era. So the brass came to replace the clay for concert purposes. It makes them look good.
Okay.
It shines. It shines, and the sound gets heavier and heavier. And if you notice the old pictures, you will see that the drums itself was a lot smaller.
Okay.
And so as the metal entered the picture, you will notice that it became fuller and more rounder in shape. And the sound also improved along with that. However, in this case, it still is wood, but they experimented with different types of wood, and they found the teak or neem wood gives the better sound when you put the hide on top. And the one other thing, there are lots of experimentation went with to get the clearer sound. There are actually 3 sounds: the kinar sound, which is the side sound, and the middle sound, which is called the maidan sound, the sur of the tabla, and then the black ball sound, which is the flat sound. And then there is a resonating sound, the conch shell sound. So these four sounds also there in Pakhawaj, except that it's played differently. Here we rely most of the time on the finger. We don't use the entire hand for the tabla, and it's difficult in an upright position. However, when you're playing it like this, this technique is used.
Okay.
So
Slap.
this
Slap,
slap,
that's with the Pakhawaj.
yeah, that's the Pakhawaj style, and they come up with the same sound, this sound, and tabla replaced that with this sound. And yeah, as you can tell, that this sound is sweeter than the Pakhawaj sound. So in terms of the sound technique, a lot of experiments are still being made. Zakir Ji has come up with a fourth finger sound. He's in tabla, and just a little bit of detail. In tabla, this is what we call the workhorse, this finger, the index finger. The middle finger is called the flat finger, which is used for flat sound, also for the sur sound. The third finger is also used, not in some gharanas, not in, like in Banaras, for example, they don't use the third finger, they use three finger. But in Farrukhabad and Lucknow, these fingers are used. So the middle and the third. Zakir Ji has experimented with this a lot, and so he now uses this one also. So there are certain syllables for playing fast speed syllable. He used this many times, and he showed us the technique how to use it. For example, when there is a super fast speed of tintal or 16 beats cycle going, and he is using it, and it's creating the same amount of resonance. Of course, it requires a lot of practice too, but it's producing the same kind of tone and the sound for playing that. And coming back to your question on the technique part of it that evolved from the Pakhawaj to tabla, a lot of changes have been made in terms of compositions. So the composition that originated in Delhi, that's played with two finger, has now moved east, which we call Purab. Purab Baj means the style of the Purab, the style of the east. Composition has evolved. Some are used for dance, for dancing feats of the court of the Maharajas and the different principality later on. Some evolved just for playing solo purposes. There is an entire repertoire for playing tabla solo, which is called Peshkar. Peshkar came from the same thing as we understand that rhythmic format follow vocal format. So in vocal, there is, when the instrument is being played, there is something called alap. There is no rhythmic expression there. So in tabla, Peshkar is a very meditative type movement in the finger of drumming, and slowly it builds it up to kaidas, which is a fixed composition, and then to relas, which is fast composition, and then there are guts, which is like a composition that is divided into three cyclical patterns.
And these are just musical. These are
and
solely for tabla,
tablas,
and they have
yeah.
a history.
Yes, and
Because-
the history goes from place to place to place. And as you know, those days there were no internet, there was no trains or anything like that. So the gharanas grew around Delhi. So from Delhi to UP, Uttar Pradesh, which is the next state adjacent to Delhi, these are where the Maharajas and their courts were settled, and all the gharanas are around. Like Delhi is the first, then came the Farrukhabad and Lucknow, which is the next two, and then a small village next to Lucknow is called Ajrara, which is number 4, and they all have their special type of techniques. and they specialize on finger techniques, and then they teach their students how to go about performing those.
This all leads, makes me want to ask you to play some of that for
Sure.
us. But we're not going to lose that. I'm going to go back to Sumya. And Debu mentioned Alap. And so I'd like you, if possible, to talk about how, a bit about the raga structure as a musician. How do you approach it when you're going to play it? The amount of, everybody talks about how much improvisation there is in Indian music, but clearly during the concert that you gave, you weren't improvising during the performance, I would think, because it was a short performance. You had to. So can you discuss?
I was improvising
During the performance, such
Yeah.
a short performance.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd like you
everything
to talk
about
that.
it is
And how do you communicate that between the two of you?
yeah. So I would say in that whole performance that we had for about an hour, there are these fixed compositions that are almost like used as motifs, both for tabla and for the instrument, and they have a certain cyclical pattern. Like if you go back to the pieces that I played, the first composition was based to a 7-beat cycle called Rupak Tal, and then the second one was more faster 16-beat. But the point is the embellishment of those compositions, as well as the alap piece, which is benounced of any kind of rhythmic pattern. That's all improvisation. And if you ask me to play it now again, like exactly the way I played it, I wouldn't not be able to repeat that, because it was at that point in time how I was thinking and expressing a rag. The melody might sound similar because there is obviously the rag. Every rag has a different way of movement, but and this is where I've worked extensively with Western musicians. Indian music tends to differ a lot, maybe somewhat closer to jazz, but the other thing I was going to add to when Debu was talking about the various schools of music, is our musical tradition has been mostly an oral tradition. And all of these things that he talked about, the various syllables and, whether it's various melodies or melodic compositions, up until about 70 years ago, there was no written history of any music. It was all passed orally from one master to their students, then to their students, to their students. It's amazing if you think about it. And for a person to retain that kind of music, whether it be melodic or rhythmic or whatever have you, in their minds and heads, and to able to pass that from generation to generation without losing it, it's an amazing accomplishment, human accomplishment. But then, when music was more formalized, and especially after the independence of India, when it was being taught more openly in schools, there was a need to document that. And so a notation system came by. But again, so because it was an oral tradition, there was a lot of freedom given to both the percussionist, the instrumentalist, or the vocalist to express. It's a way of self-expressing. Of course, there are boundaries. There's definitely grammatical nuances of how you move around, whether it's a rag or a tal scale. But then it is all up to the artists to find ways of expression within those boundaries. And so if I play a certain rag that has a certain scale, I liken that to scale in Western music, but it is not like a formal scale like it, like you're playing a C minor scale. Because even within the same scale, there could be 3 different rags, and just the nuances created by the rest notes and certain ways that you move around creates a whole different experience from an audience perspective.
Could you, do you have an example of like some,
Yep.
a couple of different rags that use the same notes but are played in a different,
Yeah,
played in a different order to create the different?
Absolutely, I can play a few, and these scales, the basis of Indian classical music. So there are these 10 basic scales. At least in North Indian music, we call them thats, and then the thats they're composed of like all 7 notes in the scale. And the rags, when the ragas are created by picking certain notes among the 7-note scale, and then creating some patterns of movement. So the ascending and descending pattern differ. So a very common, sorry, I'm just, this is like the electronic version of a tanpura, which is a drone which keeps my basic key. So I'm in the key of C, and that's where this matches my Sa and his Sur. So we're all in sync together.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is play something that is in the key of, or the thought called Kamaj. And I'm going to play what the Kamaj thought, the notes are. So plain do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The only difference is that when I came back down the scale, I used a flatter 7th note. Now, using that, and just by removing certain things from, as I go up, certain notes from the ascending, from the ascend, and then positioning certain other notes, I can create a raga. For example, if I omit the 2nd note on my way up, which is the, and just play. I've created, this is Raga Kamaj, which is very close to Thaat Kamaj, but it's very different. So I'm just going to play a few bars, then you can get the essence of this raga. That's Kamaj. Now, what if I use, instead of the omitting the 2nd note, I'm actually going to use the 2nd note. I'm going to omit the 3rd note and the 6th note and let it sound like. That's a very different melodic picture, as you can well appreciate, to Kamaj, and it's called Ragdesh. So using the same scale, I can go from rag to rag to rag, and then in some cases there are notes, additional notes that are introduced, that are not natural to the scale. They are called vivadi swars, or conflicting notes. So, for example, again sticking to the same tat of Kamaj, now I've gone into another rag that again has a different melodic appeal. It's called Rag Jai Jayanti. And this goes on and on and on.
So the tat is the scale.
The tat is the scale, so it's 7 notes. And within that, I can layer in different notes, and also the way I am playing those notes and accentuating certain notes. So, for example, the Kamaj Rag was based on where there was more accent on the 3rd note and the 7th note. Whereas in Rag Desh, the accent is on the re, which is the 2nd note, and the ni, which is the 7th note. So there you can see that the two sentiments of the two rags and the melodies are very different, and that's how the rags get developed, and these are traditional rags, and of course people tend to blend different things and create their own rags in certain cases.
How do you decide what drum cycle or tal is going to be played with? How do you guys decide that with the rag?
That
you're
depends
gonna
on the
perform?
composition that it's set to, and that comes from the person who has composed it. It could be him, it could be his guru,
Okay.
or it could be his guru. But some rags that are like it's always been like that. It came for ages.
That it always
and
has a
that-
specific
yeah,
beat
specific
cycle.
set. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, technically, you can play any rag in any cycle, and often there used to be a healthy competition in the olden days when the instrumentalist or vocalist would start playing and would look at the percussionist to catch up and figure out, like, you
Yes.
figure out where.
And that it's like a hide and seek going on. The tabla player, the rhythm person is trying to figure out what tal or what structure it is set to.
Yeah,
And sometimes it takes almost 3-4 cycles
to figure that
to
out.
figure that out.
And does that create sort of a healthy tension between
It
the
is.
two
It
players?
is all playful,
Yeah.
but the idea is that if you're worth your training, that you should be able to figure that out. Nowadays, of course, people discuss it and play, beforehand when they're warming up before the concert. They would have a discussion. So I would tell him, hey, I'm going to play 7s or I'm going to play 16s.
But would so the instrumentalist would always have a good grounding in the percussion.
Yeah, and I
Or
think.
are you unusual in that you have had?
No, I think it's a part of our training, and it goes the same way with the.
Could you turn that off? Yeah.
It goes the same way with the percussionist also. He talked about learning vocal music. I think the total training of Indian music consists of the vocal component, the percussion or the rhythmic component, and then if you are playing an instrument, you learn some other instrument. In some cases,
Actually, what I was going to say is that you know, internally when I'm performing with somebody, I'm actually singing inside.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you know, and I'm also playing it through my hand, but internally I'm actually going through the singing part and sort of layering the rhythm on top of it, which I could hear internally.
Right, yeah.
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 And the melody is very important because no two melodies are same, and the type of teka that he talked about earlier on, it varies based on the type of melody. So in case we have rehearsed it and he has heard the melody, then he would probably have figured it out. But if we hadn't met each other and we were meeting first time on stage, then it is really up to the percussionist to listen, and that's why it is so important to listen to each other and figure it out. Again, I say this going back to what I said earlier. It's an oral tradition.
Yeah.
It is based on, and you asked a question as to how do you keep in sync. It's by hearing. We are not looking, well, sometimes we make eye contact, but mostly I'm
You're listening.
listening to where he's coming in terms of his rhythmic cycle, where I am at, and
And
we're
basically what the
communicating.
music is saying.
So could we, would it be possible for you to play and you to figure out what the
Sure.
cycle is?
Yeah.
Can we, and see that?
And you can turn the drum back on.
And you can
Yeah,
turn the
yeah,
drum
of
back.
course.
And I'll,
Now, I was just going to say one funny incident that happened 2 weeks ago. There's a vocalist. I think I sent you guys the invite
Yeah.
for that. The vocalist came from Calcutta, and she is young vocalist, and I have never heard her before. I've heard over the internet and stuff, but I've never heard her a real concert. And she started singing a particular bandish, a particular gut, in 12 beats. But it's faster 12 beats. But the 12 beats sounded like 16 beats.
because she was singing fast.
She was singing fast. To me, it was more like 16 than 12. And she was singing it in such a way that it was sort of to play with me, I guess.
Yeah.
That was the idea. And a lot of time it's accepted that we don't know each other, we're playing for the first time, coming here for the first time, and then we perform, and we haven't had a rehearsal. So that happened, and I picked up 16, and then she said, no, it's 12. So
And
then,
how did she say that while she's singing?
Well,
no, she just whispered.
Whispered, okay.
Yeah. But it's all part and parcel of the game. I mean, you're not supposed to know everything. So,
yeah.
That's good.
So, yeah.
So let,
And there's another funny story I would tell if we have the time. There's this in many years ago when Pandit Ravi Shankar was a very young man. He and then there was a very famous tabla player, Pandit Santa Prasad. They were playing in a concert in Calcutta, and they were in the green room. And Panditji Ravi Shankar ji had practiced with him something in 16-beat cycle. When he went on stage, he changed it to a 15-beat cycle called Pancham Savari. The same composition. He played the same composition, just picked away one note, and that made it a 15 composition. Now, Santa Prasad ji, having heard this thing, and this was just, Ravi Shankar playing with Santa Prasad ji. He took off on a run, and without realizing that Ravi Shankar ji is playing Pancham Savari. It's the same composition, and just think about the brilliance of the man. And of course he lands on some place, and Ravi Shankar ji somewhere. And this happened a few times, and in front of a live audience. So then Santa Prasad ji just stopped playing, and then almost Ravi Shankar ji would smiled at him and said, "This is Pancham Savari," and then they continued. But it emphasizes the point of listening and the concept of listening to each other. Yeah.
I just had a question about, which maybe you could ask, and they can edit it, about the vocalization. You said that you sing while you play along.
Mhm.
Are you vocalizing? Are you singing words? Are you?
I'm just singing the melody.
which is
Oh, you're singing along with the melody.
Yeah. I'm just singing internally. I'm not
Internal. No,
letting it out.
But when
But on the tabla, I am layering it on that part that I'm singing inside.
Are you singing syllables? Are you singing
Just the
tra-la-la?
melodic structure.
Just the melodic.
Yeah.
Just
And when you would listen to your grandfather
Mm-hmm.
and his students, were they vocalizing? They were vocalizing aloud.
Yes.
Is that right? And
Yes,
they-
during the rehearsal or during the, and it happens a lot. I mean, let's say, for example, he's going to play a rag that is set to 7 beats. And the 7 is not always clear or accented, the 7th note, where it's hitting the very first note. In tabla language, it's called sum. And the sum is not very clear where the gut or the bandish is starting. And it's purposely done that way. The composer had that in mind, that I want to keep it that way. I want to create it that way. And that's the beauty of the rag.
mystery.
That's the mystery. And so when that was being done, it is creating a confusion in the mind of the tabla player. So we clear that up either during the learning process or during the rehearsal. But imagine if it is not cleared up in either way.
Yeah.
So we clear it up on stage so that there is no confusion.
And when your vocalist came, was she vocalizing with syllables or was she singing?
yeah,
words?
that's the question.
She was
Is it
singing,
syllables or
vocalizing with the words.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
So there are, with some compositions, there are words, poetry.
Yes.
Yeah, vocal music has obviously has a language. Instrumental music does not have a language, and again, there are 2 syllables in sarod, and you can create a lot of different patterns with it, but there is no language per
But
se.
you do say sa-re-ga for singing.
Yeah.
And then for tabla, you have different vocalizations.
Phrases.
Phrases.
But
And for
vocal music
sarod, do
also-
you have different phrases or different vocal?
Yeah, so
how
we
would
have
you,
2 syllables. So as I said,
Which
the
are?
down stroke, which is the da, and then the up stroke, which is the ra, and then with that you can create da ra da, or various types of patterns. Da 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 da. But the point is that you can layer it into any kind of music.
yeah. And your vocalizations would be for the
My
tabla,
vocalization
for
in
tabla,
terms of melodic part
for the tabla.
for the tabla is going to see how it is matching the melodic part. The tabla language is different.
Yeah, what is
For example, if I'm playing a na, which is this, or na tin tin na, or na thun thun na, or na tite, all of this is matching the melodic part.
okay,
Okay, so the melodic part has saregama,
right, which is the
and
voice.
like he said, there are 7 notes, right?
right.
I can match those 7 notes and come up with a particular rhythmic structure, right? But I am humming it internally to match my rhythmic structure to that.
But
Wow.
also,
So
I
there's-
think part of Yasmin's question was that you do have like a bowl
Yeah.
recitation.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
bowl is the rhythmic pattern.
Right.
And that's also recited. So there is an
Yeah.
oral tradition of that. So it is said in tabla, and I know this because I learned it for a few years, that you can only play it if you can recite it. And you can only play it fast if you can recite it fast.
Yes.
But as a tabla player, you have to know your bowls
Mm-hmm.
as well as the melodic bowls,
Hmm.
and so that's a lot of. And if you've got a dancer, then the dancer has different
Right.
melodic
Yes,
bowls, and
yeah.
so you've got to know what all of that means
Right.
and how it relates to what
Absolutely.
you're doing, which is pretty complex.
Yeah, and the fun part of it is it's often improvised. I can't remember if it was at the concert that I played here or at some other concert. In a very fast section of the composition, we were exchanging bowls with each other. So I was
I
playing
think it
some
was here.
pattern.
It's called
and-
Sawal Jawab.
Yeah, so it's like a Q&A,
Right.
and so I'm playing and he's responding, and then we come together. So that is done very common. It's a tradition that came from mostly from dance and the percussionist, but it also has crept its way into instrumental music.
That's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. So, should we see if
Sure.
you can figure out what Soumya's playing?
So I'm going to play a few traditional compositions, and there is one composition that he likes a lot, and this one you can see. This is a very traditional composition by a famous maestro in my school many generations ago, and set to 16 beat in the Rag Kamod. But you listen to it and you can see the unusual pattern in which it was composed.
I say that this
So
composition was created to confuse the tabla player.
Okay, so it may not be 16 beats, is what you're saying. You've got to figure
No,
it
it
out.
is 16
It
beat.
is 16 beats, but you don't know where the beginning and where the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be kind of interesting if you talk through it as well
Yeah.
while you're playing
Yeah.
it.
This is the part where we're improvising. Like neither he knows nor I know where we're going.
Yeah. So this is the unknown, uncharted territory.
So what I played up until now is the fixed part of the composition.
Okay.
And you could hear in that composition that it has this unusual stop in the middle, unusual pause. And if you are not, if you haven't heard that composition before, it is very difficult to figure it out. But it, you know, in
It has
the olden
its-
days, it used to be played on stage, and yeah, you figure it out and
Yeah.
And
come
how-
along.
Yeah.
So it starts from the the first beat, and he and I have practiced a few times, played this in many concerts. So he knew exactly which composition this is where the melody part of it. So he knows that.
So translating that into a tabla player's mind.
Right.
So I'm thinking da 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 da
And that's
da da. Yeah, that's where the gap is.
That's the stop.
That's where the stop is, which is making the melody so nice. But that's also a marking point for me that this is where this beat goes.
okay. Which
Okay,
is your
which is my
beat?
marking for that area. And after that, I don't know what's going to happen.
And
okay?
what beat is that goes into that
So
empty spot?
that going after the 9th or the 10th.
Okay.
Okay, so we are fluctuating between that and then moving away. And then he could go into an improv area, and I have no idea. I'm just keeping the teka alive If you move the teka, you're completely lost.
Lost. Yeah.
And I'm also, as an instrumentalist, listening for what he's playing, and I'm layering my music to go with that. So it's a lot of, that's why we call it as a conversation. And often in a concert, you don't pick that up, but there's a lot of technicality behind that what he's playing and what I'm playing, we're constantly bouncing off each other.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're looking at the tabla in terms of sort of a Western drum, there's no clear, beat structure that somebody who's used to listening to just a regular Western drum can actually pick
Because
out.
Western drums are very structured.
Yeah,
And, there
you
is
can't-
no language to it.
Yeah.
So you just pretty much going by the sound
of the bass drum.
bass
Yeah.
and so on. But if I throw you off to a different improv style, then you cannot come back to that one.
So could
So-
you play a 16 beat cycle and name the beats as you're
Right,
going?
right.
What first, second,
So
third?
first I'm going to describe it as 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 16 beats, it's going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 2, 4. Okay, so, or we can say da din din da da din din da din din da da din din. This is the language that replaced 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Okay, now once you established this rhythmic structure, then you can do just about anything, and there are like thousands of compositions to travel around that cycle.
Okay.
Okay,
let's see
so
one.
for example, I'm just giving you the beat and then moving around to do the, different things. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Da din din da din din da da din din da da din din da da ti ti da ti ti da da ti ti da ge tu na da ti ti da ti ti da da ti ti da ge tu na ge da ti ti da ti ti da da ti ti da ge tu na ge da ti ti da ti ti da ti ti da ti.
And you should talk about what a tihai is.
A tihai is something that repeats 3 times. Tihai,
It's
3.
Yeah.
And something, it could be a syllable repeating 3 times, it could be a composition repeating 3 times, or it could be just a set pattern repeating 3 times. For example, there's a pattern called dhatite. Dhatite, 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 dhatite is a tihai.
And you could
And-
play that with any
You can insert that anywhere.
any
In
rhythmic
a
cycle.
composition, rhythmic cycle,
Okay.
as long as it's hitting the first beat. So you're inserting a repetition of 3, whether it's the entire composition or whether it's. I'll show you the example of just tihai applied in different areas. For example, just a syllable repeating 3 times. Ha, 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 din, na, da, din, din, na, tin, tin, na, te, te, da, da, ha, din, din, na, tin, tin. Now I'm repeating a particular phrase 3 times. Din, din, na, da, din, din, na, da, tin, tin, na, da, din, din. Da, ti, da, ga, da, da, ti, da, ga, da, da, ti, da, ga, da, din, da, din. So phrase repeating 3 times. Now the entire composition repeating 3 times. There's a small composition for the beginners level when they learn. It starts with cut. This phrase is called cut. Cut. The entire phrase repeated 3 times. And you can play it in different speed. And the way we keep speed is by clapping ourselves. And the word in our language, the word rhythmic pattern is called tal.
Right.
And tal came from
Tali.
clapping. It's
Right.
called tali. So the way we keep the speed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 1. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're keeping the tali, same speed, but saying it in differently. So that also has a different effect, and preparing the tihai on the spot to match that one is something that you sort of work on.
Because the one is the beat that
Yeah.
is
And
everybody
it's-
hears that. That's the beat you hear.
Yeah.
You may not. Everything else might just sort of.
And the compositions
the
in
mix.
instrumental or vocal music are also normally to emphasize the main note is that one, the starting point of the beat cycle. Now, the composition may not begin from the one, but it's always the main emphasis note, and that's where the instrumentalist and the percussionist hand off each other.
So that occurs throughout the
Yeah.
composition.
Yeah.
It's not just the
Irrespect-
beginning where that note is emphasized, but throughout.
Yeah, so you may have something that starts from maybe the ninth note or the 12th note, but the composition may start from there, but the main note it'll always hit is and I'm going to just demonstrate that by playing something so that you can see that. So this composition that I'm going to play in a different rag, it starts from, I'm going to give it away, and it starts from the 7th beat. But you can see that the emphasis of the composition is going to be on that first beat. So you can see that in this case, that emphasis of that composition was that kind of the slow drawn out melody, but that was the highlight of that whole entire composition, and he knows that.
To him. But to me, the marking point, la 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 la, that's
That's
my
a
marking.
landing point.
That's my landing point, and that's where the thing is starting. So to us, music is talking to us differently.
Yeah.
To me, it's the tabla player's language. For him, it's the melodic language, but the
Okay.
appeal is the same.
And you're syncing those
And you
two.
were syncing those two.
Yeah. Just so, how are we doing for time?
We're fine. It's about 5 to 4. So are there other things that you want to talk about or cover? I mean, it's been.
I mean, we can talk forever.
I know.
That's the
And
point.
there's so
How
many
are you
things to
doing
talk
on
about.
TV
34 minutes left.
left? And Jonathan, are you okay?
We've got 34
So
minutes.
You have that if you would like to use it, or not. It's organic.
Yeah, and what we could do is demonstrate a few different rhythmic cycles.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great.
And also the fact that I think I made this point during the concert of how you can start from a very slow tempo and then it builds up to the very fast tempo, and you can go on there. So there are so many different rhythmic patterns to talk about.
Yeah. There's 165 tals.
So there's one question I have about rhythmic pattern. I mean, we, especially I think in the 16 beats,
Mhm.
they talk about the empty beat, the khali.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is that? Can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
that and see if that is in the other beats that you're
Yeah.
going to talk about
And you
as
should
well?
talk about not only in 16 beat, but talk about Rupak Tal,
Yeah.
because it starts from a Kali.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
So,
introduce the concept of the
yeah.
khali.
So the concept of Kali or emptiness or no clap, so to speak. So the way the 16 beats, and one of the reasons it's called the mother of all tals, because this is the first thing we learn when we start tabla. Why do we learn that? Because within 16 beats, all the other tals, all the other major tals are hidden. So it's sort of like a clue to learn other tals also. And that's where the Tali Khali concept comes. And the way we keep Tali Khali or clap or no clap is the very first beat is clapped, then the fifth beat is clapped, and then the ninth beat is not clapped,
Yeah.
and then the 12th, 13 beat is clapped again. So the way we keep count of that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 1. So if I use the tabla language, dha, din, din, dha, dha, din, din, dha, dha, tin, tin, ta, ta, din, din, dha. Now this is my formula of the 16 beats. And I want to demonstrate you how the other tals are hidden in it. So, but you're keeping the 16 beat alive. Now you're saying kaharva, which is 4 beats. So dha, din, din, dha, dha, din, din, dha, dha, tin, tin, ta, ta, din, din, dha. Dha dina na tina. Sorry, this is 6 beats. Dha dina na tina dha dina na tina dha dina na tina dha din na tina dha dina na tina dha dina na tina dha din tina dha. din.
So the ninth
That
is
dra.
always dropped wherever
Yeah.
Yes.
wherever it goes.
Yes. And the same way, if I'm saying kaharva, which is 4, dhage tete nage dhina 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 dha. So kaharva, and then there are rupak tal, 7 beats, 9 beats, and it gets more and more complicated.
But one thing I would like to clarify, just he showed that those other beat cycles can exist within a 16 cycle. But if you just want to recite, like he recited Dadra, which is 6 beats, and then you want to show that same counting, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the same clap and blank technique comes into other ones as well.
Oh, into other
Yeah.
beat cycles
Yes,
as
because
well.
if they're your major, see, the reason why I didn't go into that is because here my teen tal is my major. The other is being played as minor. But if I make, let's say Dadra as major,
Right.
and then teen tal within that, if I
So
play
you're
that,
overlaying.
You're overlaying it.
Okay.
and
But-
that's where it gets
Yeah.
complicated.
But interestingly, not every beat cycle starts from the clap. So I was asking him about Rupak.
Yeah.
Rupak is a 7-beat cycle. It's
Yeah.
a tin tin na din na na din na.
So it goes like tin tin na din na din na tin tin na din na din na tin.
Yes.
So,
So-
how does that work out on? So when you're playing the tabla,
Uh-huh.
your fingers do not touch.
No, but internally we're
So
Doing-
you're not
It's a
making
softer note.
It's a
The
soft-
thin means, and also in the thintal,
Mm-hmm.
when he is playing the kali, it's a softer note
Okay, it's
versus
not it's not an
it's not a
empty-
heavy note, and
Okay.
more often he's not playing the ba, he's just making a tonic sound with the dia.
with the dial. So it's going like
call out the khali.
Yeah. Din na, din na. So you can hear the softer note as a audience. You can always see where the tali khali is, and obviously, if you know the music, then you appreciate that. But the idea of the tali khali came from where there's an emphasis on certain beats and where there's softer or drawback. Obviously,
Right.
you still have to keep the beat,
Right.
but since you mentioned, there are certain beat cycles where there is a blank note, truly a blank note. For example, there's a tal pattern called dhamar. It's a 14-beat cycle. The legend goes it was drawn from an elephant's walk. So why don't you recite dhamar?
Yeah. So the dhamar tal is 14. It goes like ka, dhe, te, dha, ga, di, na, ghe, ne, dha, a, ka.
So there are two blanks in there.
Right.
He recited the ka, dhi, ta, dhi, ta, dha,
So how does
ga,
that?
di, na, ta.
Ka.
And how does that work out on
Yeah.
On this,
Tabla.
yeah, it's actually came from Pakhawat.
Okay, that one.
So this particular tal used to be, still is, sung with Dhrupad, but a
Yeah.
lot of instrumentalists play.
I'll
it.
let him play, and then I'm
then
gonna
he will
play,
bring the melody to
a melody that is set to Dhamar Tal.
So it goes like this: ka, di, di, da, ga, di, na, ge, ne, da, a, ka.
Okay.
As you can see, the significance of elephant walk.
So it
in
does
there.
definitely.
Yeah,
so.
it's just like this kind of toddling elephant, and the idea is that because of those two blank notes or blank rhythms, it can throw
Throw
the
you off.
instrumentalist or the vocalist off. So this is the kind of the
The
tabla
revenge.
player's revenge on, or the Pakhawaj's revenge on. So I'm going to play a little composition set to Rag Kedar, and this was composed by my teacher's contemporary, a very famous musician, Pandit Buddhadev Dasgupta. And this starts from the 8th beat, but you can again see where the emphasis of the melody points to the sum or the starting beat.
That's very different from.
Very different
Very
from
different.
Tirtal, but this actually gave you a flavor of the ancient tradition that they were talked about, which is the Dhrupad style, and there is a vocal aspect of these type of composition that evolved into more modern day singing. But these are very, very traditional. And the composition that I played is not very old. Obviously, it was made in probably last 15, 20 years ago. But the fact is that that composition reflects the traditional style of the Dhrupad. And Dhamar is a tal cycle that was very extensively used in Dhrupad, as well as with another 12-beat cycle called Chautal.
And is Dhrupad slower? Is it more? I mean,
It's
what
more
is-
meditative.
It's more meditative. Actually, Dhrupad has a very big component of alap.
Okay.
And even before the percussionists start playing, there was almost like an hour to 2 hours sometimes of just the vocalist or the instrument just playing alap. And the alap section, you had asked me earlier, I did not answer. There is a component of the alap section, which is, there are actually 4 stages of an alap, at least in Sarod vocabulary. So the first phase, which is the most commonly heard, which is without any kind of rhythm, just purely the bars being introduced, and the swaras being introduced. Then comes a part where there is a rhythm part to it, and it's called Jor. And this also came from the Dhrupad, the vocals music. Then you start to use some of that aspect of the rhythm. It's not set to any beat cycle, but you can hear that there's a rhythm part to it. I mean a rhythmic aspect of it.
To the melody, though.
To the melody.
Melody.
And I'm going to play in a few seconds to show or demonstrate. And then it goes into full embellishments like tankari, that like you would do with a rhythm, except that it's still not set to any beat cycle. And then finally, the very fast portion of the jhala, that's also played. So I'm just going to again play a little bit of alap in the same rag that I was playing, Kedar. So I mean, I played a very brief alap, but you could see how this could be elaborated to a significant extent. Then comes the Jor portion. How does that go? It starts again very slowly. And so it goes.
And so that has a greater.
So I'm actually
beat.
keeping the beat or the tempo, more to say, not any beat, the tempo through using the strum. and this would pick up as I'm going along, and when it gets to a point where so you can see that there is a lot of tankari that is being done, a lot of rhythmic patterns, but again, I'm just keeping my own beat, not set to any tal side.
Right.
Finally, this is the third phase of the alap. The fourth phase actually goes into full-scale jhala. And finally they would so this whole tradition that is now played today in instrumental music actually came from Drupad. So they do this through vocalization techniques, and they would recite bols, and so what I'm playing is da 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 da, they would say dum ta na 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 dum ta na na, and then later on this actually got into another form of singing called tarana, which was also taken from instrumental music, went back to vocal music, and was modeled after percussion. So Drupad has given a lot it has given a lot of ideas that have branched into different forms of vocal and instrumental music.
Fantastic.
And the same thing with tabla. When we are the whole concept of alap, I raised it when I was saying that when a tabla soloist is playing tabla, he starts off with peshkar, and peshkar is the alap of tabla. If, for example, he played the 4 stages of alap, we also do the same thing when we play solo, and that happens in the peshkar style when we perform. And the peshkar, the first part of the peshkar is sticks to the school that it comes from. For example, Dilli peshkar uses more finger techniques of these 2 fingers. Farrukhabad and Lucknow, which I like a lot, it deals with a lot of meditative type syllables. For example, dhi kare dhinna, tidha dhinna, dhati dha, kre dha dha dhinna. All these syllables are coming from the Lucknow style.
And does it go
and
from slow to
It's
fast
very
as well?
slow, yeah.
You wanna
It's
play
very
some?
slow, and it's set to a very slow teen tal or any tal, for example. I mean, peshkar could be in any tal, but I can show you a little bit of
I'll keep
peshkar demonstration in this teen tal. example of meditative, slow style peshkar. Now, I'll show you a mid part of it, a little bit faster tempo. Not in there. Our base tempo is the same, but the peshkar in mid tempo moved up and developing on the same rhythm. This movement will be developed into other rhythmic aspect of it, but it's going to go in same bass tempo but a different set.
And while they're doing the peshkar, the instrumentalist, or at least I'm also trying to adapt and play something similar.
Yeah.
That resembles the peshkar.
So it's the time where he's calling the shots.
Yeah, just the reversal of roles.
Yeah.
And then the third stages, which is a little bit faster, just like his is. The third stages, and the last stage is the fourth stage. And we can develop this also in a bigger style, but in order to develop this, you need to play longer. In a solo, that happens.
And in when you perform together, say like in May, you in the middle of the performance, do you, when the tabla player starts to showcase his
Absolutely.
playing, do you then go sort of
Lay
lay
low,
low and sort of
Yeah,
do a
you-
semi-peshkar?
Yeah, so I'm actually repeating, almost playing over and over the same gut or the composition, the fixed composition, and that's just to keep time.
Yeah.
Just like when I'm playing, he's keeping time. We do the reversal of the roles.
And is this sort of a modern development?
No, it's been there that way forever.
traditional.
Now, again, there has been some healthy competition. So there is a concept of satsangat where you can both go and improvise without knowing where each one of it. But in your head, you have the beat cycle, so you know where exactly to come together.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there is another thing. The reason why I said earlier it's traditional is because a lot of schools, for example, Lucknow. If you're playing with a Lucknow Baj or Lucknow style tabla player, and you know that a lot of times the syllables are harder and it's got a ringing sound to it, because they're used to playing with dancing feet, and so the same tabla players are going to play with instruments or vocal. In those cases, the vocalist or the instrumentalist, they just let them go. They just play free flow, and you can see those images coming in their hand.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're coming to the end
Okay.
of the tape, and I'd like to thank you both very
Thank you.
much.
It's a pleasure.
Both
Pleasure.
maestros, Sumya Chakravarti, and Debu Nayak. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
Thank you, Yasmin.
coming in.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.